And welcome to StackHunters. I'm Bradley Stalder, your host here for the weekly Best Ball podcast. But we've got a special crossover edition tonight with Randell, Memphis Young of the Dynasty Warzone, joining me to talk about all things fantasy football and fragility. We're going to look at some players and some trends that we expect to be a little bit of controversial, over the next few months, and how we're going to suss some of these players out, maybe even positionally. We're going to take some deep dives and macro views. It's going to be a great conversation. Memphis, welcome to StackHunters.
Man, I really appreciate it. This is, outside of getting to work with, people like Theo and Matt Kelly and Billy Muzio, the opportunity to create content across the Player Profiler Network, whether we're talking, and because we're just talking football, we're going to shape it toward this audience. But I just love that there's so many people that I can come on their show, they can come on our show, and we can just talk football. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Well, all of that and more from Bradley and Memphis in just a moment. Well, Memphis, we're here. Usually we talk best ball, and we are going to talk some best ball, but I think this is a great time of the year to talk about how players will be trending over the next few months. You, from the Dynasty perspective, I play some Dynasty myself, so I'm in 20-something leagues on Sleeper and a few others on MFL, but so I do dabble a little bit in the Dynasty, but the best ball streets just got opened on the FFPC and Underdog, and I think it's going to be important for us to take some views of the positions, the players, and all of that. As you enter into the off season, what are some things that you keep in mind as you are preparing for, or maybe closing out a league, or even beginning the next season of a league? Like, are you targeting particular positions? Are you trying to sell off players? In the pre-show meeting, we mentioned how there are like running backs of a certain shelf life. Like, what are some things on your mind as you're preparing over the next couple months before the April draft?
So first of all, again, by the way, for the audience that's new to me, I am always going to promote from within. I'm shameless that way. We work with a ton of talented rookie content creators. Cody Carpentier's back, and we got Matty Keywoom, and I don't want to leave anybody out, so I'm just going to leave it with that. We have a lot of, so they're doing the rookie stuff. So I know that they're going to keep me up to date on what's going on with the rookie class. I know some of them are down in Mobile right now for the Senior Bowl. So they've got that on lock for me. I'm going to catch up, but like what I'm doing right now is I'm looking for pockets of value. So whether that's Dynasty or whether that's best ball, I'm looking at guys whose situation are going to take a potentially a big change, and that could be a good change. Now, it's speculative, but we talked in the pre-show meeting about Antonio Gibson. He's a free agent. What if you draft him? Where do you think Antonio Gibson would be going? Like you just mentioned, NFPC and Underdog have started. What round? Just a guesstimate.
Antonio Gibson, later than 12.
Okay, so like we're talking like he's like player 165 off the board.
I can pull up the ADP. It's pretty late. It would be my guess.
So what if as a free agent he signs as the running back in Jim Harbaugh's offense in the LA Chargers?
Okay, even worse. Randall, I got it.
All right.
He's going off as of yesterday night. Running back 57, 193rd overall.
So that's like the 16th plus round.
Yes, virtually free.
Virtually free, and if you nab that guy, now he may wind up turning into dust, which is very, very possible. But if you hit on a guy like that, and it's the same thing we talked about with Dynasty. If I go out and get him for like a third, because everybody's got rookie fever, for like a late contender's third or anything like that, I win. Like in Dynasty with what I do, I can flip him, I can package him in a trade. There's so many things I can do. And for you guys that are creating these stacks, we know every year a running back comes out of nowhere. And it's not just the Chargers. There's going to be someone land in Houston, because I don't think Dameon Pierce and Devin Singletary or it long term. Joe Mixon's likely out of Cincinnati. There's going to be 4 or 5 or 6 really good spots for these guys. So those guys that now Derrick Henry's also a free agent, but he's not going to go in the 16th round.
Nope.
So that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at for some of these fringier guys, maybe rookies that disappointed that could have a bounce back season. And those are the pockets of value I'm trying to work on between now and free agency. Then after the NFL free agency in the middle of March, I really crank up the rookie. I mean, we're going to be doing rookie content. Got a mock draft this weekend live on Sunday. But that's my big focus of the early off season.
Yeah, Kendre Miller, you mentioned running backs, rookie running backs that we can be targeting. I was talking with Dario Offstein earlier today regarding our best ball rankings, which will be coming out at the end of this week. And Kendre Miller and Ryan Hull were both rookie running backs that have been kind of forgotten and thrown by the wayside. And I think that they're players that fit your mold pretty easily.
Another guy that I really like in that mold, like Michael Wilson. Hot name this time last year. Now, I know they're probably going to draft Marvin Harrison Jr. in Arizona. They've got Trey McBride, but, he's the kind of receiver. If you look at like his game logs, he had a couple of 2-touchdown games. And from a best ball perspective, where you just get the best score, if he wins you a week or two, he more than returned his ADP value to your team.
Definitely. And we've seen Michael Wilson hit before, multiple double-digit performances last year, even with Hollywood Brown in the lineup and Trey McBride in the lineup. So, and Kyler Murray was not there for some of the season. So definitely, I like the Michael Wilson call. There's going to be more great calls from Memphis and myself in the Best Ball and Dynasty streets right after this.
Now, I know many of you are looking for a secret weapon for your Dynasty League, and I have it. It's called the Dynasty Dominator app. You go to the App Store, go to Google Play. It's right there. It's $5 to download, and then every year it's $5 to load the next incoming class of rookies. You can add Superflex, add tight end premium. It's incredible because it allows you to look up players. It allows you to vote on whether a player is a buy, hold, or sell, and then see the market sentiment on that player. And you can compare their lifetime value rating from Player Profiler to their Dynasty ADP at the FFPC, all in the price lookup tool. And beyond that, we have a trade analyzer, so you'll never lose another Dynasty trade again. And in our settings, you can set this is a win now team, this is a rebuilding team, and then we let you compare players. Look at their metrics side by side, prospect metrics, NFL metrics. It's all there. It's $5 in the App Store. There's some add-ons for Superflex and to buy the upcoming rookie class. Every year, you're going to spend $5 on this thing, and it's going to be well worth it.
That's right. It is going to be well worth it. And Memphis, we're going to jump into a little bit of philosophy and talking positions, macro positions. We're going to look at some trends based on ADP and data over a long term, over the course of 5 months from last year. I'm going to pull up our data right here, and it is ADPs overall from players drafted in 2023. So I got the ADPs from Underdog Fantasy, and we're looking here at just percent change. So what we notice is that more players lose a lot of value from January through May, which makes sense. But some of the biggest fallers, I think from last year, like a couple come to mind for me is Tom Brady. Like he was being drafted, January, February, March, and then he retires. And so his ADP plummets. But outside of that, like we see just a little bit of dipping across the entirety of ADPs. 7 of the top 10 risers in ADP were wide receivers, which kind of makes sense because, these wide receivers, we get clarity and their positions are stronger. But 7 of the top 10 were running backs as we're looking like overall, which we talk about shelf life for running backs, that they get replaced in the draft more often than wide receivers get replaced immediately. And the average player loses about 10% of their ADP value, and less than 31% of veterans improve their ADP. So, like from a general perspective, it's kind of hard to say, hey, we want to be, buying a lot of players. It's more so cashing out and selling maybe some of these. We know who they are, and we know their upside isn't going to access what we want anymore.
Yeah, it's the volatility of the position. So you have the running backs, which largely disappointed this year, and several wide receivers stepped up. I gotta assume Puka Nacua is a big swing in this, and like Jonathan Taylor. I'll even go because we didn't know it when best ball stuff was going on, but you also have Austin Eckler, who had to have fallen like a rock. This is to be expected. We would need like our injury correspondent on here with us to talk about, but I think of the fragility of the position. I don't know why more people aren't first round wide receiver regardless of format, unless it's super flex. To take that aside, but in one QB formats, I don't understand why your first round pick wouldn't be a wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, even looking at the results, like many best ball players will look at who won these tournaments, like overall, like an underdog or in the FFPC. Many of those begin with a wide receiver. The guy who won the season long started with Stephon Diggs in round 1 and then Josh Allen in round 2. And it's not, Diggs didn't even hit that well this year. He finished like wide receiver 16 or 17 in terms of best ball value rating. So you don't have to hit your first position, first round draft pick. But, if we look at like quarterbacks, there was a lot of hotness last year for like round 2, round 3 quarterbacks, the Jalen Hurts, the Josh Allens of the world. Patrick Mahomes was in that conversation as well. Things have dipped a little bit since last year. Now you're able to get Jalen Hurts like end of round 3 and Josh Allen like at the beginning of round 3. How do you think that the attitude of drafters will impact the ADP of quarterbacks given how they were injured and poorly performed this year?
I think their ADP will come back closer to what we saw in 2022. I don't know that it will go. I don't know what all-time levels are, but I know there was a lot of a groundswell in the industry last year about pushing quarterbacks up. And whenever something disappoints, whether it's zero RB or hero RB or robust wide receiver, just any philosophy of drafting you've seen, when that philosophy falls flat, even if it's just for a season, it's going to cause a reaction. And I think that's where savvy gamers, whether it be Dynasty or Best Ball, if you don't need to focus on where the league's been, you need to focus on where the league's going. And like another thing I'll be paying attention for in the offseason is what changes are the rules committee going to make? And how are they going to put, because I will tell you, the NFL was not thrilled to see a 17-7 game with the Chiefs and the Ravens in what was the highest rated, most viewed AFC championship game of all time. Something like 54 million people. Yeah, try telling me Taylor Swift's bad for the NFL again. That's a side note for a different conversation. But yeah, it's the NFL is going to want more scoring. So, but what emphasis is that going to change? Is that going to help the tight end? Is it going to help the running back? Is it going to help the wide receiver? Is it going to help the quarterback? And then we take that predictive thinking. We're thinking that, hey, this is what the changes are going to be. And then you can get ahead of this year's draft trends.
Right.
Don't draft off last year's draft trends. You try to figure out what's going to happen and not what has happened.
Yeah, and one of the things that we noticed from last year was not only that quarterbacks were being pushed up, but they were being pushed up because there was a lot of uncertainty about those round 3 flex types. And so once you got clarity, once we knew that Kenneth Walker was going to have competition from Zach Charbonnet right there, then his ADP dropped. But you also just got more confidence in who those running backs, they weren't going to be replaced. The wide receivers weren't going to have as much competition. The DK Metcalfs, Tyler Lockett's of the world, we got information that the Seahawks were going to draft Jackson Smith and Jigba. So that information does shift, and we can then come in and say, well, because we know that these flex players in the first 3 rounds are not going to really be impacted from now until training camp and the preseason, then we can just wait on quarterback, and we don't have to feel like, well, I need to make sure I get a safe pick here in round 2 or the beginning of round 3.
Now, let me ask you a question. Do you think quarterbacks will become a value this year because of last year's trend? Do you think you're going to be able to nab a Josh Allen? Are you excited for Jalen Hurts with Kellen Moore as his offensive coordinator? Are you going to draft a Kirk Cousins or a Russell Wilson, hoping they land in a good spot? Like, I think everybody would. I know. I don't need to think. I know everybody would go bananas if they landed even a decent quarterback in Atlanta for those guys. So, do you think quarterback's going to become the value this year based off last year's fall?
I think that the ADPs are going to be wider, and it's not going to be as strict as it was last year. So I think you are going to see more variance, which means that the quarterbacks like the Hurts and the Allens are going to be more accessible throughout the offseason. So yes, I think you're going to be able to draft them without. Last year it was more difficult because it felt like you were very restricted drafting if you wanted to stack, because Memphis, we're here on StackHunters. We're trying to get the stack. Stay on hashtag on brand here. You're pretty stuck drafting AJ Brown at the back end of the first and Jalen Hurts in the early second, and you were not going to get Devonta Smith in the third. And so, like, if you were trying to like stack that way, and so you felt kind of restricted when you were drafting. And same thing with Diggs. Like you were able to get. You would have to move Diggs up to like 105, 106, because you were probably not going to feel justified taking Josh Allen at the beginning of the second round. So you're kind of stuck in this, like you felt kind of pigeonholed. I think right now, I mean, it's January 31st. It's not even February yet. But in the 2024 drafts I've been in so far, I've been able to get whoever I want not whenever I want, but I haven't felt that pressure to be pigeonholed into, I feel like I need to stack here, or worried about where the players are going to be, because I think there's also going to be, as you mentioned, a lot of value. I think one of the players I'm targeting a lot is Anthony Richardson. I think there's a lot of groundswell for love for him, but I think other fantasy gamers have forgotten how good he was. He was quarterback 5 and best ball value rating last year in the games that he played. And in year 2 of Shane Steichen offense, and I think this is Jalen Hurts 2.0. And if you can get access to a quarterback who can achieve quarterback 1 overall at quarterback 5, quarterback 6, quarterback 7, because I've seen Anthony Richardson go that late, I want to take lots of shots on that type of player.
Let me ask you a question real quick about wide receivers then. So maybe you're trying to decide between a wide receiver 1 or, you have like one of the first few picks.
Yeah.
And you got like a CeeDee Lamb on the board. You've got Jamar Chase on the board. You've got Amon-Ra St. Brown on the board. Now, obviously, you're going to take. I'm taking CeeDee Lamb there, but does it make a guy like Amon-Ra? This is strictly a best ball question. Does it make a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown feel more appealing? Tyreek Hill more appealing because you feel like you'll be able to get Tua or Jared Goff or that type of quarterback a little bit later? And does that allow? Does that come into your thinking when you're like basically like chess? This move sets up the next move, sets up the next move.
Yeah, and that's also, so not only am I thinking about that player, like drafting Amon-Ra, but also, can I take Sam Laporta later too? Can I get a couple of these Lions? Can I get a Jahmyr Gibbs? Because I'm probably not going to get Amon-Ra and Gibbs on the same team now, but maybe I will, like if I have this chance. But those are like the multiple players I want on these teams, especially the good offenses. So when it comes to like strictly first round wide receiver versus where they are in terms of quarterback, I also am looking at what have they done for me in the past. And we've seen Jared Goff be a top 7 quarterback in terms of like rate of top 5 weeks. And we've seen Tua be led to spike weeks. I think that I'd prefer Jared Goff though. Because
100%. There's got to be someone out there in these underdog and FFPC tournaments that had a Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta stack. Right. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say those ladies and gentlemen did very well for themselves. And then you have Brock Purdy, and there's a good chance you could have got Brock Purdy, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle. And I think about that, and maybe that's something that you and I just in this conversation, that's something that the StackHunters that listen to this show, that's what you guys are called, by the way. That's your official name. When you listen to the StackHunters, you are in fact a stack hunter. Like, is that what we need to look for this year? What is going to be the value stack? What changed? Who got a new OC? Is it Chicago with Shane Waldron? Can I get DJ Moore, Caleb Williams, and Cole Kmet? Do I think, and I'm not going to spoil where we talk about Justin Fields, but do I start there's your primary stack. Obviously you want a CD, Dak, Ferguson. I get it. But do you start looking at like in some different builds, looking for that quote unquote value stack to where you could try to catch that Laporta or Purdy or whatever?
Yeah, I think that two things. I love pairing known upside swings with ambiguous, uncertain stacks, because then you're getting a guarantee and you've got like a foundation or a base, and then you're taking a shot and rotating through. So some teams that I'm liking to take shots on this coming year are the New England Patriots. Like, we just don't know what they're going to look like. They could go out and get a free agent quarterback and draft Marvin Harrison. And then that offense looks completely different. Same thing with Washington. Same thing with whichever offense. I mean, outside of Pittsburgh, I think we know what we're going to get from the Steelers. But
I don't want to veer you off, but some of the other podcasts I listen to, I think the Steelers are going to make some significant impacts. And I know we hate Arthur Smith. He did our guys Pitts and Drake London dirty. I do understand. But go back and look at Ryan Tannehill's numbers under Arthur Smith, and go look at Patrick Mahomes. Go look at Patrick Mahomes in that same window. Just because you can't be a head coach and you're not a good overall team leader doesn't mean this guy doesn't know how to call plays.
True.
And that could be I don't know that I want Kenny Pickett. I don't want Kenny Pickett, especially in a best ball tournament. But does that implied impression create value? And that's all we're looking for. We're trying to steal some value on the back end of these drafts.
And that's how the winner of the Best Ball Mania 4 regular season, he drafted both Nico Collins and Tank Dell. Two players like, there were some people who were very in on CJ Stroud as a prospect. Phenomenal. But there was like this general worry that the Texans would just not be a good team. Like that's why Nico Collins, CJ Stroud, and Tank Dell were all being drafted really late. In fact, in that draft, the winner of the Best Ball Mania 4 regular season, CJ Stroud went undrafted in that draft. 18 rounds. CJ Stroud wasn't taken. Like,
that's wild.
That's how, so no one had access to CJ Stroud. They only drafted both Tank Dell and Nico Collins. So that's what I mean, is leaning into known commodities and then taking some swings on these unknown, ambiguous situations that people will say, well, they're bad because they're the Texans and they have a rookie quarterback and a new head coach, right? And we just didn't know. And it could have been, but it hit the right side of variance. CJ Stroud was a baller and elevated his guys. Like, Nico Collins was not a great player coming into 2023. And Tank Dell, I mean, he was a day 2 pick, but there were concise concerns. There were other concerns that he was not a perfect prospect. But CJ Stroud was able to elevate these guys along with Dalton Schultz. And so I think that leaning into these ambiguous stacks is going to be something that you just want to rotate through, especially for volume drafters. You don't want to just completely say 0% to situations where you could be wrong about.
Yeah, and you got to look at like and just you're listening on Player Profiler. Just stay tuned. We're gonna do once all the head coach candidates and OCs and everything's filled. We always do a show about what impact does that bring. It's like Baker was a revelation this year, right?
Yes.
Baker, Mike Evans, that was tremendous. But I feel like people will try to go back to that well again and not take into account that Canellis, the offensive coordinator, is now plying his trade as the head coach in Carolina. And instead of trying to recapture, magic with Baker and Mike Evans or Chris Godwin, what's it looking like for Bryce Young, Jonathan Mingo, and one other player? And you have this random, very dirt cheap stack on the back end of your rosters. I mean, it depends on, how, like to your point, basically you don't want a 0%. But there are some guys you have to fade, and like Baker's on my fade list.
Yes.
And there's nothing against Baker. It's just that Baker's been very offensive coordinator dependent throughout his career, whether that was in college, whether it's been in the pros. And I don't know who they're going to bring in Tampa to replace Canellis. So these are just the kind of things that go through my head.
Yeah, and you mentioned Canellis being now the head coach at Carolina. I love taking Bryce Young late now. I think that he's very interesting. I'm still not convinced about Mingo, Memphis. That's for a different conversation.
Sure. It's a dart throw.
But, Canellis was also the one who turned around Geno Smith's career too. So that he's hit 2 years in a row and third time.
Oh, sorry. You mentioned Mingo and I didn't mean to cut you off, but you also meant that Anthony Richardson.
Yeah.
That's a stack I can get behind because the natural logical order is I want to get Anthony Richardson and Michael Pittman.
Yes.
Completely understand why you would think that. But what if maybe you miss out on Michael Pittman, but if you get Josh Downs, I don't want Alec Pierce, but like Josh Downs, when he came on for a time it was starting to happen with Richardson and it happened for a while with Minshew, and then it cooled off. But those are the kind of stacks that if you're just getting to that second and third level and not just going, oh, I take Dak, I take CD, that's the way this works. If you dig a little bit deeper, there's a lot of cool value out here right now.
Yeah, Downs was a target earner. He was an early declare on North Carolina. Loved his profile. I was hoping he had gotten like second round draft capital, but I'm not going to complain about third round. And pairing him with the second year Anthony Richardson. There was the do you remember the parking lot narrative, Memphis? The day after they were drafted, they were throwing balls to each other in the parking lot.
I remember that. I'm a Colts fan. I live just like I live 10 miles north of Indianapolis. I wasn't thrilled about the Josh Downs pick at the time. I will tell you, I have changed my tune. You completely want to be on board Michael Pittman. He's going to be a target hog. They're going to re-sign him. But we saw under Shane Steichen, we saw Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown both flourish with Jalen Hurts. There's no reason why, if you're chasing stacks, man, there's no reason why you don't want to get – if you miss out on Pittman, it's not a bad consolation prize to lock up a Downs, because if that hits to that Philadelphia 2022 level, then you're really doing something in these best ball tournaments.
We'll flip to wide receivers and tight ends real quick, and then the back half of the show is going to be talking about specific players that we're sussing out the concern about. But with wide receivers last year, it was pretty stagnant. There wasn't a ton of shift. Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave last year were the biggest risers. Garrett Wilson, obviously, because of the Aaron Rodgers trade to the Jets. But Memphis, this is wild that Garrett Wilson was getting drafted at like the 14th overall pick last year. So very early second round. And now he is being drafted 12th overall. His ADP has increased about 2 spots since last year. And Aaron Rodgers is a year older, coming off an Achilles injury. I I can't get behind Garrett Wilson being that high. I mean, last year I was drafting a lot of him, but we know how that worked out. I can't do it.
He finished in now this is all 17 games. He finished as the wide receiver 26 in full point PPR. He had 168 targets. He had 95 catches. And I get that a target isn't always a target. I dig it. That's why PFF, player profiler, that's why we do things like quality of targets, right?
Yes.
But how much better? It's like for him to give you a positive ROI at ADP 12, you're much better off taking someone else there and taking a different player later. You're looking for. I kind of say it's like, and I get last year. I get why you would become excited. But now we're going into same thing with Chris Olave. To be quite honest, I love Chris Olave. I don't love Derek Carr.
No,
and that's not likely to change. So, yeah, it's baffling to me. You just, I don't know. It's like the hot stove. Yeah, it's hot. I'm gonna put my hand on it. Are you gonna go put it on there again? I'd rather risk it somewhere else. I don't know what this all. It's going to be weird. Nathaniel Hackett, Aaron Rodgers, stay away at 12 overall. And I'm a Garrett Wilson guy.
Yeah, all of the efficiency metrics were there that indicated that both Olave and Garrett Wilson are great players. Problem is their situations are so debilitating and were so debilitating that it impacted them significantly enough that like there are some players that, they're in a bad situation, but they can overcome it. This is not the case for Olave or Garrett Wilson. It is that bad, and it can be that bad. And like, even if we looked at on Player Profiler, shout out to the Player Profiler data team, especially Dario. Garrett Wilson was wide receiver 6 in expected fantasy points last year. Wide receiver 6. So he would have paid off had he been able to get all of the things perfectly expected. He would have probably been close to paying off. But that means that for this year, he needs everything to, again, pay off. Like 3 years ago when Aaron Rodgers was the MVP, Devontae Adams was wide receiver 3 or 5 in terms of expected fantasy points. Like, that's MVP level Rodgers. Now we're 3 years removed from that, and Rodgers is coming off the injury. You're needing MVP level from Aaron Rodgers this year for it to pay off. I can't do it.
There's too many variables that have to fall. We'll call them dominoes. There's too many dominoes that have to fall in your favor to make this work. I mean, Rodgers has got to return to form. Garrett Wilson's got to continue to evolve. Everybody has to stay healthy. What if they draft a wide receiver? I've seen mock drafts where they're taking a Rome Odunze, a Malik Neighbors. If that, even Brock Bowers, if that happens, if they bring in more target competition, even though they're better targets, do you still get 168 targets? I would much rather, I don't know who else is at that ADP in that range, but I would rather go with someone else potentially in that range and then try to get Rashee Rice or someone like that a round or two later, as opposed to paying a premium for a guy like Garrett Wilson.
So Garrett Wilson is going ahead of, this is ADPs as of last night on Underdog Fantasy. Garrett Wilson is going ahead of AJ Brown, ahead of DJ Moore. I think that's a good tier for him to be ahead of, but still, like, give me Brandon Ayuk even over Garrett Wilson. Give me, Jonathan Taylor. Give me
Michael
Debo,
Pittman.
yeah.
You mean Michael Pittman? I mean,
Pittman,
he was averaging 3 more PPR points per game. I mean, Garrett Wilson's got to take a big step forward in the quality of what he does to catch Michael Pittman, and they both got a bunch of targets.
Yeah.
So it's just way too expensive, crazy expensive.
All right. The last position we'll chat about is tight end. Tight ends didn't lose a lot of value last year, but Kelsey did drop a little bit last offseason. Ertz obviously dropped a little bit. You don't see tight ends really move because rookie tight ends are usually drafted to voids. Like they're usually not drafted to, well, there's also this super tight end in that same spot. I mean, we did see that with Goddard and Ertz a few years ago, but usually that's not the case. And so when we're drafting like a Brock Bowers or someone like that, like we're expecting they're going to come in and replace a zero. Maybe we see like a Gerald Everett drop, that's a possibility. But I think Travis Kelce is one that might actually rise a little bit this offseason, especially if he has a good Super Bowl performance.
See, I'm pro Travis Kelce. I would be very careful with him. He is going to go from, I'm just going to use the analogy of cars. He is going to go from being your daily driver, your dependable, your family SUV, you get the kids to school, you go get groceries. He is going to go from that type of a vehicle to more of like grandpa's Corvette. You bring him out when it's sunny, the roads are nice, there's not rain, you're going to go for a cruise. And I think that's part of the reason why he's looked so good in the playoffs. Now, I think he would love to be more involved. We all would, but he's literally like a year younger than Rob Gronkowski. He's retired twice. So I could see Kelce sticking around. I would caution the audience of being very careful about trying to get 2021, 2022 Kelce. I think they like take it easy on him. They see the end is closer. You just saw his brother retire. He's got more money than he'll ever need. And I would be careful with him. And then you mentioned Bowers and the rookies. First of all, don't get off your feet because Sam Laporta had a great rookie season, and now that's the expectation or higher for Brock Bowers. That's how you get disappointed.
Right.
The career arc of Michael Mayer, who I love. Trey
Give
McBride.
Me all of the Michael Mayer this offseason.
Dude, if you're looking for next year's Trey McBride, that's Michael Mayer, especially if he gets a quarterback. Yes. We're going to talk about here in just a second. But yes, with tight end, I know Matt, the Podfather, he hates the coaching narrative, the coaching analysis, but some quarterbacks, some coaches, they just throw more to the tight end, like Justin Fields. He just loved Cole Kmet and DJ Moore.
Yep.
Some people do. And then Trevor Lawrence, but some guys don't. So be careful with these tight ends because there is not a more volatile group from year to year performance in fantasy football than the tight end. This year's hero is next year's zero.
Well, you're getting a discount relative to last year on Travis Kelce. He was going pretty easily in the first round. Right now, Kelce, as of last night, is going 46th overall, which actually, Memphis, I put out way too early 2024 rankings, and I had Kelce at like 53, 52, 53. And I got like roasted. One of the guys was like, he's definitely in the 20s. And I'm like, no, like this is where he's going to have to go for us. And he's not going to fall any lower than that because of name value and the stack with Mahomes and all that. Like he's got insulation from falling any further, past production, blah, blah, blah. But we cannot depend on Travis Kelce being the tier breaker that he was in previous years, where it was a multi-tier difference between him and the next tight end. I mean, he wasn't even the tight end one this year in terms of best ball value rating. It was Sam Laporta. So yeah. And Laporta is going as the tight end one right now too. So in the way too early ADPs. So we'll wrap it up. Any last words before we get into a few of the players that we want to suss out a little bit more?
Nope. I am excited to talk about this. This first guy on the list is just one of my, if you listen to my show, you will not be able to control yourself in this segment.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about players that we have concerns about their fantasy futures. The first is Justin Fields, Chicago Bears quarterback out of Ohio State. Coming out of Ohio State, he had one of the best passer grades downfield of any quarterback in the class. And then he got drafted to the Bears with Matt Nagy and did not look prepared at all for the NFL. He has gotten better every year, but has it been good enough? I think the answer is no to stick around in Chicago. If I'm a betting man, which, we do this on this show by drafting players, it's essentially a bet on their future. If I'm a betting man, I'm betting that Chicago drafts Caleb Williams and trades Justin Fields. So there is a concern that Fields is not going to be on Chicago. He's not going to have DJ Moore. He's not going to have the Cole Kmet that you mentioned he has this good chemistry with out of Notre Dame. Those Notre Dame tight ends, they're so good, so good. But the reports are that he's going to net like a second or third round pick. And in the pre-show meeting, we listed a couple places, but one of them really stood out to you. Which one was that?
Oh, for me, I have never. I don't want to make it sound like I'm anti Justin Fields. I was anti the hype, and I didn't understand it. Where I want him to go, if I had to rank him one, because this is the perfect place to resurrect your career, it's the Las Vegas Raiders. First of all, for him, it's a great win. No state income tax. He lives in Chicago. There's fairly high income. So you're paying no state income tax. You get Devontae Adams. Now the football. You get Devontae Adams. You get your former college teammate, Zamir White, because they were, I don't know that they were necessarily, they were both Georgia guys because Fields was at Georgia for a hot minute. You get Michael Mayer. And if you're the Bears, you don't have to face him every year, every other year. You face him once every 4 years unless you play him in the Super Bowl. The other spot that I could see would be the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yes.
Now think about Pat Fryermuth and oh my gosh, the guy with the ski Pickens, George Pickens.
Give me
Deontay Johnson. I mean, and as the Podfather has dubbed, the Alfred Morris corollary with a running quarterback. I just don't think that he can land in a worse spot than Chicago. I think Chicago is the new mistake by the lake. I think it's sorry, Anand, I know that's your squad. I think it's a poverty franchise. And I don't think there's a spot he could land that could be much worse than the Bears. And I'm not saying that because I know you're a Packers fan.
That's very kind of you, Memphis. I'm glad you noticed. Some people don't notice all of the Green Bay, helmet.
The Bakhtiari was the sell.
Yeah, so Bakhtiari, his number is 69, right, Memphis? And
nice.
He was once asked why it was 69, and he was like, "Well, Aaron Rodgers can throw the ball somewhere between 68 and 70 yards." So, shout out to Bakhtiari.
I don't see anything wrong with that correlation.
So Justin Fields, we expect him to be super fragile, though, and we've seen the equivalent of second round picks, third round picks. Maybe I don't think he'll fall for a fourth round, but you never know how wonky these things will go. We've seen quarterbacks traded for less than a first round pick or other players traded for less than first round picks not really pan out and have short shelf lives of the original team moving on from them. One name that comes to mind, Chase Claypool, recently traded to the Bears for a second round pick. Once again, poverty franchise, right? Huge mistake there. But also Trey Lance was recently traded for and given up by the San Francisco 49ers. So I think that there's a scary floor for Justin Fields that if he's traded to somewhere, like the Bears lose leverage by saying, we're just going to draft Caleb Williams. And I don't know how strong of a market there is for Justin Fields.
I think there has to be. I mean, there are plenty of teams that need a quarterback, and I think there are plenty of teams that would at least entertain the question. The Raiders. Now, imagine if he lands in Denver with Sean Payton. Jarrett Stidham's not the guy going forward. Could you imagine what an offensive guy like Sean Payton could whip up? I'm telling you, and I'm stealing this, and I'm denoting it right here on StackHunters, and I'm stealing this. But this is a Colin Cowherd thing. He was like, very few players have the ability to overcome a dysfunctional franchise.
Yes.
He's like, you've pretty much had like Andrew Luck, who was able to take a dysfunctional Colts team until they got him killed and he had to retire early. But very few guys have the ability to, we see Trevor Lawrence, who we all think is uber talented, struggling. Jacksonville's been a dysfunctional franchise.
Yep.
It's not Justin Fields' fault that he's talented. He's just not quite talented enough to overcome the Bears. So if he lands, and I'm not sure the Raiders are much better, but if he lands in Pittsburgh, are you kidding me? You land in Pittsburgh with Mike Tomlin. You land in Denver with Sean Payton. he could fall into an offense that, God forbid, you have an offensive coordinator actually know how to maximize what you can do, as opposed to saying, this is my offense, this is what we do.
Yeah.
I think it'll be shocking. So this will confuse people. I am pro Justin Fields getting out of Chicago, not because I don't like Justin Fields, because I don't like Chicago.
Yeah, my last thought is that, obviously the price tag would be significantly less, but my worry too is that teams will peg him in a similar way that they pegged Lamar Jackson. And the reason why there was a lot of rebuffing toward 5 different teams publicly came out and said, we don't want, not just like, well, the price is too high, but we just don't want Lamar Jackson, who's now in contention for the MVP for this year. Like, my concern is that they are very similarly profiled in the NFL and that teams were just simply not interested in that type of player.
Well, I'll leave you on this. There's enough hubris in the NFL coaching community that someone's going to say, I can fix him. I can make him Lamar Jackson. Someone's going to say it because they did it with Sam Darnold. And if they'll do it for Sam Darnold, damn it, they'll do it for Justin Fields. We talked in the pre-show meeting. I think he'll probably get like a second and maybe a fifth, very similar to that Darnold deal. And I'm hoping he lands with a franchise that is capable of helping him get to that next level. Is he capable? Yes. Will he? Don't know.
Well, another player that we expect to just be obliterated in the NFL draft in terms of fantasy stock is Sam Howell. He's all but dead, already benched. Washington's expected to take a quarterback. Brissett was already getting play. But we saw Sam Howell be useful for fantasy for a lot of the season. And in your super flex drafts, especially in best ball, if something happens if it's Drake May, Jaden Daniels, if they trade up for Caleb Williams, I don't think Washington moves on from Sam Howell. They just put him as the QB2, and in your super flex drafts, you draft him as like your quarterback 3 or quarterback 4. Because if something happens, he can access quarterback 12 on a week. But I think that his he's only contingency value moving forward.
I'm kind of bummed. I will say this: Sam Howell won me a fair good chunk of money. I had a league where I went into the year with Josh Allen and Deshaun Watson with Sam Howell as my QB3 in a super flex. You know who carried me? We finished second in this league, but I got second place money out of it. So I have a lot of respect. Here's the thing. I'm actually impressed because we were told about all the good things that Eric Bieniemy was going to do for this offense. Well, if you're going by points, they were the 25th best offense. If you go by yards, they were, probably toward the top of passing yards, I can tell you, or total yards, but they're also at the top of the league of getting him killed in sacks, which he ended up, and I think that's what hurt his play. But from a dynasty and for a best ball standpoint, I'm bummed. I was hoping he could have taken it, but you cannot 100% blame Washington, especially with a new GM who I really like, Peters. I think he's a sharp dude. Spent time in New England with Bill Belichick, spent time in San Francisco with Shanahan and John Lynch. But a new owner, new GM, you're going to want a new quarterback. It just kind of all goes to get new coach. You're just it's basically a clean slate across the board. I think Hal's fine. I think if you draft, say it's Jaden Daniels, who's a mobile quarterback, it might behoove you to back him up and pick up a Sam Howell because that if he has to step into that role, he can function.
Yes.
And he may even start for a while. Because we saw this with Gardner Minshew this year. Gardner Minshew is also very usable at times.
Yes, he's
the new Gardner Minshew. He's the less cool Gardner Minshew.
I love it. Love the analogy. Let's clump the next couple players together because they're all on the same team, and it's Derek Carr of the New Orleans Saints, Alvin Kamara, and Taysom Hill. They're all in varying levels cap casualty possibilities because number one, the Saints are in cap hell for those who are unaware, and they've been that way for some time. Michael Thomas is essentially all but gone too. I'm not putting him on this list because I don't know who would want Michael Thomas on their fantasy team. But Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, Taysom Hill. Taysom, I think he ends up in Denver with Sean Payton. I think that's your quarterback possibility, running the Wildcat for the Broncos. That would be crazy, but also delicious for fantasy. What do you think, Memphis?
If your league allows him to have tight end designation, yes. I think, speaking of new ownership groups, new head coaches wanting to pick their quarterback, that's going to be Sean Payton, and it's one of the Walton families that's tied to the Walmart money that bought the Broncos. I don't know that they will settle for Taysom Hill on their like $5.6 billion. He can't be the hood ornament on their shiny brand new thing. But I could easily see him being brought in to be like a Swiss Army knife, because that's what he is. You know what's funny about Taysom Hill is that Tim Tebow could have done that role so much more. He could have been so much better at that role. He just had too much pride and couldn't realize that there was a good future in the NFL if you could have just been Taysom Hill. And then my man Alvin Kamara, I absolutely love. So Jerry and I, earlier in the Dynasty season, we did our Mount Rushmore of Dynasty, like current guys, and then all-timers. And I had Alvin Kamara on my current Mount Rushmore over Christian McCaffrey because he has been so durable. Now, McCaffrey has the spike years, like, this past year, and I think it was 2021. But then he had the years where he had huge injuries. And when Kamara played this year, he was excellent, and he's always been excellent. And he's been so consistent. Jerry had CMC. I had Alvin Kamara. Like, I would love to see him go someplace where they would use him in the same fashion. And then don't bum me out with Derek Carr. They may be over $86 million over the cap in New Orleans. I wanted to believe, because I think Derek Carr, the guy's a decent guy. Yeah. I think he's a good teammate. People like him. A guy like Devontae Adams, he's a character guy, a good man, and he wanted to be reunited. That tells me something about Derek Carr, but he doesn't have it.
He does
and not. So of these three, I feel the most comfortable that Carr's going to stay. I think Kamara has to go. And you mentioned Kendre Miller. Great call, by the way. Let everybody else chase Tajay Spears. Yes. You go get Kendre Miller.
Oh, don't forget.
I'll throw in a Zamir White too.
44.
I'll throw in a Zamir White too. Go get him. But it's going to be ugly in New Orleans, man.
It's going to be so bad, and that's why Kendre Miller. I got him at running back 44 just today in an FFPC best ball draft. Kamara's going to be gone. His cap hit is just too high, and with Kendre Miller, who had more than 2 yards per route run. He was the only rookie running back with more than 2 yards per route run, which is crazy. But outside of Chase Brown actually had the highest, but he didn't meet the qualifiers. Chase Brown, we'll talk. Sure. Let's go to Joe Mixon then, because I'm big Chase Brown guy. 4.4 yards per route run, Memphis, and he can catch the ball. He looks dynamic. Joe Mixon was a cut candidate last year, and the Bengals didn't do it. I don't know what's holding them back this year. I think they have something in Chase Brown. Brown is a buy. I think Mixon is someone we'll see plummet in ADP.
Well, we did our cold takes episode, but this was one of the takes that I got absolutely right. I think last year was a great opportunity to ride Mixon for one last season. And then in Dynasty, I was like, hey, if you're not contending as you get toward these playoffs, now's a great time to get rid of Joe Mixon if someone's got some running back injuries. I like your boy Chase Brown. I know the Podfather didn't. I think he's fine. My fear is that this is it's not a great rookie running back class, but it is such a good free agent running back class that I could see them with a team in their contending window. I could see them going out and adding an Austin Eckler, a DeAndre Swift, and that would hurt Brown. But we know how fragile the running back position is. So you cannot. Now, obviously, his ADP could spike, But if his ADP stays relatively cheap, man, go get Chase Brown, baby.
Brown right now, running back 34 off the board. He's behind Devin Singletary, behind Chuba Hubbard, behind, obviously behind Jalen Warren. But Joe Mixon is going at running back 21 right now.
Those people are the ones paying the winners. Yeah. I don't want to be hurtful, but those are the ones. It's just, that's what I would, tell the listeners is put together your draft strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing you're going to tell yourself before you put down your hard-earned dollars and you enter that draft lobby, you're like, I'm not going to draft guys based off names. You have to play, especially a seasonal game like best ball, because in Dynasty, guys even guys who haven't done good in recent years, they'll give you another sell window. They'll always open something up and give you one last chance to sell. In best ball, you cannot act like that.
Nope.
You can't look at it through the rear view mirror. You have to look at it through the windshield. Doesn't matter where you've been. It matters where we think we're going. And if you don't see a positive future on some of these speculative guys, don't draft them. Nope. Draft guys with upside. We'll leave it at this. Before you hit the draft player button, you need to say to yourself, does this player have upside? Legitimate league-winning upside? And if the answer is no, you might want to move on to someone else.
We will move on to, we got maybe one or two more players that we'll hit on before we call it for the night. Memphis is been just an absolute stud here as a guest on StackHunters. Make sure you guys are following him at DWZ Memphis on Twitter, right?
That is it. DWZ, short for Dynasty Warzone. That's my podcast. Memphis, that's the name they gave me. Actually, it's the name my best friend gave me off of the movie Gone in 60 Seconds. That was Nick Cage. Everybody loves a good Nick Cage reference. He was Randell Memphis Reigns, and my best friend and son's godfather said Randell Memphis Young, and it's stuck for the last 20 years. So that's how I wound up there. But yeah, at DWZ Memphis.
Also wanted to say congratulations to you and the Dynasty Warzone for 800 episodes. That's phenomenal. So shout out to you guys.
Well, I appreciate that. And shout out to Theo for realizing it. I mean, I don't want to go full Belichick on StackHunters, but we're on to the next episode. We are not looking at where we've been. We're looking at where we're going. And but it's no,
1,000 or bust.
You know, something cool that we're very proud of. I think it was 6 years ago.
Yeah.
We've had at least one episode every Wednesday, and then this season, because we want to be good partners with Player Profiler, we moved to Thursday. But we have never missed a week in like 6 years. Whether it's me, I'm on vacation, Jerry's on vacation, family commitments, we've always worked together. We have a great network of guys on our own channel, Dynasty Warzone, that does other podcasts, other YouTube content. We've always been blessed to have someone step in and help us, and this technology's gotten better too. But no, thank you very much for bringing up number 800. We're easily going to get 1,000. We got to get 1,000 at this point.
Easy peasy. It's in the bag. Randell, Memphis, Young joining StackHunters. Let's talk some Chargers, because they got a new head coach, Jim Harbaugh, and I think this is good for the organization, but I'm not sure how good it is for individual players. For fantasy, we've seen Jim Harbaugh throughout his NFL and college careers as a coach not just establish the run, but live and breathe the run. That's what Michigan was known for, running the ball down other teams' throats and just the occasional precision pass to make it happen down the field. There was even a joke that, if you were a wide receiver at Michigan, you were garbage. We look at the Donovan Peoples-Jones, and before CJ Stroud came along, Nico Collins was falling in that bucket. But now that Jim Harbaugh is in LA, I think we should be concerned about Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, not only for their role, but also for their salary cap. Keenan crushed as an upside wide receiver this year. He was top 5 in terms of rate of top 5 weeks among wide receivers, but he's a cap casualty this year along with Mike Williams, but his efficiency metrics have dropped precipitously over the last few years. He's still a good route runner, but the fall off can be very bad. And if the offense goes from pass heavy volume to rush volume, Keenan, who just lives and breathes off of targets, I think is going to be in a lot of trouble, even if he stays on LA.
I think Keenan's fine because I was sold the opposite bill of goods this year that Kellen Moore was just going to be stupendous for all of these guys. And as Lee Corso would say, not so fast, my friend. Ooh. So the research I'm going to do is I want to go back. Who was the last truly great? Because I think Justin Herbert is a great quarterback, and I think he has the potential to be a next level quarterback. But who was the last great quarterback that Jim Harbaugh really had? He had Kaepernick. He's got J.J. McCarthy. I want to go back and look and see what he did with a young, scrappy sports player named Andrew Luck. What did that look like when they were together at Stanford? Was he all run and gun? Because I kind of look at Harbaugh as like when you watch the show Chopped. They just give you ingredients and they're like, make something the best that you can. Now some chefs, they're like, I can't make a chocolate cake without all the right ingredients.
Right.
But a guy like Jim Harbaugh can go in there and whip you up something pretty good based on the ingredients he has. And I think he'll keep Keenan Allen. I think Mike Williams is gone. I think he may have got cut as we're recording this podcast. I don't really know. Eckler's gone.
Well, he's either cut or he's like broken his back again.
Yeah, he could have fallen down some stairs. That's a very, very fair point. But I think Jim Harbaugh looks at Keenan Allen and he was like, and the Chargers have their own cap issues. They're not New Orleans bad, but they're not good.
But they're pretty bad, yeah.
They're pretty bad. And I see Mike Williams being a casualty. But the one guy that if I'm just saying if it was me, that he's older, but he's never won with speed. And he's a guy that's my quarterback security blanket. Mm-hmm. I've got the gamble on the outside, the big guy. I've got Quentin Johnston. We'll see if we can put some stickum on his hands and he'll catch the ball for us this year. It'd be great. Not too much pressure. But I will tell you, we're going to know a lot in like 6 weeks because free agency is right around the corner. But I think Keenan will be okay because I just don't think you get rid of your best player, especially in a division where you've got Sean Payton trying to build his team. You've got Patrick Mahomes. You got to have your own weapons. Mike Williams isn't one, but I think Keenan Allen will be.
Yeah, Quentin Johnston, unfortunately, I don't think there's any hope there, Memphis.
Have you seen the classic Dumb and Dumber? Yes. Where Jim Carrey goes, so you're telling me there's a chance. That's how I feel about that's how I relating to Quentin Johnston, people who have him in Dynasty. You see Jim Harbaugh come walking in the door because remember, Quentin Johnston beat the brakes off his Michigan team 2 years ago.
Yes.
In the playoffs. And he's like, I remember you. And this is what I can do with him in my offense. If you like Quentin Johnston, things could be worse.
Well, Memphis, did you see this? I'm going to pull this up. ESPN Fantasy just posted a quote from Quentin Johnston saying, I feel like I'm due for a breakout 3 hours ago.
First of all, I like that. So for those watching on YouTube, I'm wearing a baseball hat. It's my son's high school team. I coach his travel team. And I tell the guys, first of all, as your coach, you need to know that I believe in you. But more importantly, you have to believe in yourself.
Yes.
And you have to go out there every day. You know, I love the fact that this guy believes in himself. Doesn't mean that he's going to do it. He could believe he's a little teapot, short and stout. That also may not be true. But I like the fact that he feels like he's not sulking. Hopefully he puts the work in the offseason and he can take a step forward. I don't root against these guys, but you better work on them hands.
Yeah, well, Quentin Johnston ranked among 64 wide receivers with 65 or more targets. He was 60th of 64 in PFF receiving grade year one, 63rd of 64 in receiving yards, 62nd in yards per route run out of 64, and 55th in QB passer rating when targeted.
Hey, listen, just because I love chaos on social media, especially on X, Twitter, I love chaos. It's going to be such a good story this time next year when Quentin Johnston bounces back and Jackson Smith and Jigma does it. Twitter is just going to melt. It's just going to turn into like a pool of wax.
Quentin Johnson. So,
Quentin Johnston, league winner.
Yeah, Quentin Johnson this year. I have a best ball value rating, Memphis, and Quentin, for reference, like Jordan Addison was like 7.6 out of 150. Zay Flowers was 6.1. Quentin Johnson was 0.19.
Is that good?
That's
not good. No, it's not good. It's not good.
You need about 30 Quentin Johnstons on your team to get one Zay Flowers.
Yeah, it feels like a whiff. That's why I said when the pick comes, I think they're five or six. I've heard people say they should go alt or the tackle from Penn State. Like I said in the pre-show, I'm not saying his name because I can't. But I could see where they go tackle. But what's wrong with going full Philadelphia Eagles and just going back to back wide receiver? There's nothing wrong with it. Go get Malik Neighbors. You have the big outside guy. Go get the guy that with 1 year with Keenan Allen, because Keenan Allen's a pro. He knows his time's coming to an end. He can pass along some of those trade secrets to a Malik Neighbors, or if you like Rome Odunze better. I think he's too similar to size wise anyway to Johnston. But anyway, yeah, that's I think my man Keenan's fine, and I'm going to steer into the Jim Harbaugh experiment.
I like it. Remember, guys, don't take any zero exposure. Just find the right times to sprinkle in players that maybe you're low on, maybe you're uncertain about, but don't be 0%ers. All right. That's been an awesome episode of StackHunters. Hopefully this was great help for you. If you like the content and found it helpful, smash the subscribe button here at Player Profiler. Memphis, it was an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you for getting on here. I was like, I need to have Memphis on. And then I circle back like 3 months later. I'm like, Memphis, I need you on.
Well, I think now's the perfect time. First of all, thank you so much for having me. And it was great getting a chance to like I said on Twitter, to chop it up with you, because I think you're a great host. I try to listen to all my Player Profiler, brethren, but like we're looking for the same thing right now. Whether you play best ball, which is your show's content, or Dynasty, which is mine, we're looking for value, because if you take 2 or 3 or 4 of these value propositions, you've only got to hit on 1 or 2 to be very profitable at the end of next season. So that was why I wanted to wait and come on now, because I just think there's as much as this word's kind of a no-no, there's a synergy between our shows right now that we may not have in 3 months.
Hashtag crossover edition.
Hashtag crossover, yeah.
I love it. Well, on behalf of Memphis, I'm Bradley, and until next time, good luck in the best ball streets, everybody.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.